All right, so get this. Today, we're diving into the world of design systems.
Ooh, design system.
I know it might sound a little techie at first,
Yeah.
but trust me, this is a fascinating story about how one company used this like secret weapon to completely transform how they make their products.
Right. And it's really interesting to see how these things are changing everything.
Totally. And the company we're looking at is Betterfly.
Oh, cool.
And they actually call their design system Bubble. So kind of a fun name.
I like it.
And the best part, we have some awesome behind-the-scenes stuff.
Really? Like what?
We're talking internal presentations, we've got documentation, we even snag some notes from their team meetings.
Wow, so it's like a sneak peek into their whole process.
It really is, and what we see is that Betterfly didn't just create this for fun.
Right.
They had some major challenges they were trying to solve.
Like what kind of challenges?
Well, they had tech debt.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Their designs were all over the place, inconsistent, and their product development process was kind of a mess.
Makes sense why they needed a system then.
Totally, and their goal was huge. They wanted to create the best digital product in the entire InsurTech industry.
Ambitious.
Right, but they knew they needed to get things streamlined.
So Bubble was the answer.
Exactly. Bubble was their way to bring order to the chaos and set themselves up for success.
I see. So it wasn't just about making things look pretty. It was about making the whole process better.
You got it. They wanted to make everything better, faster, more efficient.
Right.
They even set some super aggressive targets, like reducing front-end development time by 25 to 35%.
Wow, that's significant.
And that's not all. They also wanted to slash design time by 50%.
Seriously.
Yeah, and get their products to market 15% faster.
That's a game changer.
It really is. And they believe Bubble was the key to achieving all of that.
So how did they actually do it? Was it just picking some cool fonts and colors?
Oh, not even close. They had a really structured approach. They adopted this thing called the atomic design methodology.
Atomic design, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's basically a way to break down complex designs into smaller, reusable pieces.
Like Lego blocks.
Exactly like Lego blocks. So instead of starting from scratch every time, they build this library of components.
Right, and everyone on the team can use them.
Exactly, and that's where it gets really smart because it eliminates all that guesswork and redundancy that was slowing them down before.
Oh, I see. So it's like a more efficient way to build.
Exactly, and Betterfly took this idea and created different levels of components in their design system.
Okay, so tell me about these levels.
Well, they had ions, which were like the most basic elements,
Okay.
like your colors, your typography, that kind of thing.
I see.
Then they had atoms, which are simple components.
So like buttons and input fields.
Right, and then they kept building up to molecules, organisms, and even whole page templates.
Wow, so it's like a whole system, not just a style guide.
Right, and that's a key takeaway here. Betterfly realized a design system is about way more than just making things look pretty.
Yeah.
It's about creating a way more efficient and scalable way to build their whole digital ecosystem.
That's huge.
It really is, and that's what Bubble helped them do.
So did they document this whole process, how they built Bubble?
They did. They documented everything.
Nice.
They outlined how everything was organized, both in their design tool, Figma, and their development framework, which was Flutter.
Wow. Like an instruction manual for building with Bubble?
Exactly, and that's incredibly valuable for everyone on the team.
Yeah, especially new members, right?
Absolutely, and make sure that everyone is on the same page and working from the same set of principles.
Makes sense. So they had the vision, the structure, but I'm sure it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Oh, definitely not building something this ambitious. There were definitely challenges along the way.
Right, I was just thinking that.
One of the first things they ran into was getting everyone on board with this whole atomic design approach.
Well, yeah, that's a pretty new way of working for a lot of people.
Totally, and then there's the challenge of actually making sure everyone is using the design system consistently across all their products.
Keeping everyone in line.
Exactly, no small feat.
So how do they deal with those challenges? Any secret strategies?
Well, one thing that really stands out in the meeting notes is this idea of treating everything as a first version.
A first version, not like a final product.
Exactly. They embrace this idea of iteration and continuous improvement.
I like that.
They knew that Bubble would evolve over time.
Right.
So they focused on getting something workable out there and then refining it based on feedback.
Smart. Progress over perfection.
Exactly. And another key strategy was communication.
Oh, of course.
They knew that for Bubble to be successful, everyone had to be on board.
Makes sense.
So they really put effort into explaining the why, the benefits, the process.
So it wasn't just about the system, it was about building a whole culture around it.
You know what? They even created a playbook to guide people. They had regular meetings. They even launched a campaign to promote adoption.
Wow, a campaign for their design system.
Yeah, it was like they were launching a new product, but the product was Bubble itself.
That's a cool way to think about it.
Right. And all of that just to make sure people actually used it.
Because it's only as good as its adoption rate, right?
It's exactly. If people aren't using it, it's not going to have the impact they were hoping for.
So we've talked about the vision, the structure, the challenges, but who were the actual people behind all of this?
Well, it was truly collaborative effort.
Okay.
They had dedicated Bubble designers and Bubble developers,
Mm-hmm.
but they really stressed the importance of collaboration with all the other design and development teams.
So Bubble wasn't just a design thing, it was company-wide.
Exactly. And that's what made it successful.
I'm starting to see how this was more than just guidelines. It was a reflection of their whole culture.
Absolutely. Their commitment to collaboration, continuous improvement, it's all there.
It's like a recipe. You need the right ingredients, but then you have to combine them in the right way with passion and creativity.
That's a great analogy. And speaking of recipes, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll take a closer look at the specific ingredients of Bubble and how they were used to create some of Betterfly's most successful products.
Okay, looking forward to that. So we talked about Betterfly's big vision for Bubble, right? And how they tackled those early challenges. But now let's get into the nuts and bolts. Like, how did they plan for this thing to actually evolve?
Interesting. A plan for a design system.
Yeah, they had a roadmap,
Okay.
a 3-phase plan actually outlining how Bubble would grow from this like fledgling idea into this powerful tool.
Like they were thinking long term.
Exactly. They knew this wasn't just a sprint, right? It was a journey.
Mm-hmm.
So their first phase, they called it Do Better Starting DS.
Catchy.
Yeah, and it focused on laying the foundation.
So what were the key elements of this foundation?
Well, first things first, they needed a single source of truth.
Okay, a single source of truth.
Yeah, think of it like the ultimate reference point for anything design related at Betterfly.
So no more like scattered documents or conflicting styles.
Exactly. Everything centralized, accessible.
Makes sense if everyone's working from the same playbook.
Right. Less confusion, less inconsistency.
Exactly.
So to achieve this single source of truth, they did this really comprehensive audit
Oh, wow.
of all their existing design components,
Right.
analyzing, what was working, what wasn't, what needed to be updated, redesigned.
Like taking inventory.
Yeah, exactly.
And they didn't just stop there, did they?
Nope, they also did usability testing,
Oh, smart.
getting feedback from actual users.
Right, so incorporating user feedback right from the get-go.
Absolutely. And they realized they needed clear governance too.
Oh yeah, rules of the game.
Exactly. They established roles, responsibilities, defined workflows, documented everything.
So by the end of this first phase, they have a solid foundation. Right?
Significant progress.
And a well-defined process for creating and managing their design system.
Yeah, they had those Figma libraries, the diagram of their front-end architecture, and they started working on that formal workflow for contributions and collaborations.
Okay, so the foundation was set. What was next?
Well, the next phase was all about adoption.
Makes sense. You can build the most beautiful system in the world, but if no one uses it,
Right,
it's
exactly.
not going to do much good.
So they shifted their focus to building a community
Okay.
around Bubble, fostering that culture of design system thinking.
So like a company-wide movement.
Yes. They wanted everyone at Betterfly, not just designers and developers, to understand the value and how to use it.
So they were aiming to create a company-wide movement.
Yeah, they wanted everyone to feel like they were part of the Bubble journey.
I love that.
And they had specific targets too, like 100% integration of their libraries within all product design work.
Wow, so no more one-off designs or rogue components?
Exactly, everything built using Bubble.
Ambitious.
They also planned dedicated Slack channels, regular DS team meetings.
Creating that space for communication.
Right, asking questions, sharing ideas, working together to make Bubble even better.
I see. And then to solidify this community even more.
They wanted to release that first version of their DS foundation, like the core set of design principles and guidelines.
The constitution of their design system.
Exactly.
So by the end of the second phase, they'd have this thriving community of Bubble users,
Right.
all working together to build and maintain their design system.
Exactly, which brings us to the third and final phase of their roadmap.
Okay, hit me.
Be Better Team's productivity.
All right, now we're talking.
This is where they leverage Bubble to boost productivity and ultimately create those amazing digital products.
So this is where we see the real benefits, right?
Yeah, increased efficiency, consistency, and speed.
Okay, so tell me, what were their goals for this phase?
Well, they plan to release their web and app libraries via NPM.
NPM.
Yeah, it's a package manager for JavaScript.
Okay.
Makes it super easy for developers to access and integrate Bubble components.
So no more copy-pasting code or reinventing the wheel.
Exactly. Huge time saver.
And to make things even smoother, they also plan to create comprehensive documentation.
Right, with guidelines, code examples, even accessibility considerations.
Like a user manual for developers.
Exactly. And they also planned a robust system for communicating updates and releases.
So everyone's always on the latest version.
Right. No surprises or inconsistencies.
Thinking long term.
Precisely. They understood that a design system, it's a living thing. It needs to be nurtured and updated.
So they had the foundation, the community, and now this focus on productivity.
Yeah, and they had those ambitious targets too, right?
Right, for reducing development time, design time, time to market.
And they had specific plans to hit those targets, like launching that comprehensive DS guideline document.
Okay, so not just providing the tools, but also the knowledge.
Exactly, empowering their teams to become design system experts.
So they had a solid plan to take Bubble from concept to reality.
They did, and one thing that was really interesting was how they adapted atomic design.
Right, they made it their own.
Yeah, they really tailored it to their specific needs and goals.
Okay, so remind me, how did their version of atomic design work?
Well, remember those different levels of components?
Yeah, the ions, atoms, all of that.
Right, they took that concept and created this clear hierarchy of design elements.
Okay.
Ranging from the most basic building blocks to complex, fully formed UI sections.
So like a pyramid.
Exactly, with the most fundamental elements at the bottom and the most complex at the top.
Okay, I'm visualizing it.
And at the very bottom, they had their ions, which were like the atoms of their design language.
So those were the basic building blocks, colors, typography, spacing.
Exactly. And they also included UI icons, illustrations, brand assets, even currency-related imagery.
Currency-related imagery. Interesting. Why was that?
Well, remember, Betterfly is an insurtech company.
Right.
So they wanted a consistent visual language for all those financial concepts.
Makes sense, showing that attention to detail.
Creating a cohesive brand experience.
Okay, so they had their ions. What was next?
Then came the atoms.
Right, the basic UI elements.
Things like buttons, input fields, checkboxes, drop-downs, you name it.
So the essential ingredients.
Exactly. And because these were built using those predefined styles and guidelines from the ion level, they were guaranteed to be consistent.
Like built-in quality control.
Exactly. No more rogue buttons.
They're mismatched input fields.
Yeah, and this consistency makes the experience much smoother for users.
They can easily recognize and understand how to interact with the interface.
Exactly, no matter what product they're using.
Yeah, so they had the foundation, the interactive elements. What came next?
Next up were molecules.
Molecules.
Yeah, basically groups of atoms combined to create more complex components.
Give me some examples.
So think accordions, cards, navigation bars, those little loading states.
Okay, so taking those individual atoms and assembling them into larger units.
Exactly, just like building a house out of Lego bricks.
And just like you can build different types of houses.
They could create a variety of molecules using their library of atoms.
Okay, I like that analogy.
And it gets even more interesting with organisms.
Right, the big complex component.
Yes, larger sections of the UI composed of multiple molecules and atoms working together.
So like headers, footers, forms, those product cards you see on websites.
Exactly, and just like a well-written paragraph, a well-designed organism should be clear, concise, easy to understand.
I see, and because they're built using the predefined pieces,
they're guaranteed to be consistent with the overall design system.
That's like they were creating this modular system for building their whole digital experience.
Exactly. They could swap out different organisms, add new ones, rearrange them without redesigning everything from scratch.
Okay, so they had ions, atoms, molecules, and organisms. What else was there?
Well, then came templates.
Templates, okay.
Now, templates were a bit different. They weren't components in the traditional sense.
Okay.
They were more like blueprints or frameworks that define the overall structure and layout of a page.
So if organisms were like furniture in a room, templates were the floor plan.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Okay, I can see that.
Templates provided a high-level structure, but they didn't dictate the specific content or functionality.
So they could use the same template for different pages.
Exactly.
But populate them with different content and organisms.
Right, to create unique experiences.
While still ensuring consistency.
Exactly. Clever way to maintain that consistent look and feel while still allowing for flexibility.
And then at the very top, they had pages.
Yes. Pages were the actual screens users saw and interacted with.
So the finished product.
Exactly. And because pages were built using all those predefined elements, they were guaranteed to be consistent.
It's fascinating how they took this abstract concept of atomic design
Yeah.
and turned it into a practical, scalable system.
And they documented the whole thing too,
Of course they did.
outlining how these elements were organized in both Figma and Flutter, how they were named, categorized, everything.
So they were thinking about the long term.
Yeah, maintainability, scalability, making sure it could grow and evolve with the company.
That attention to detail, it's impressive.
It is. It's not just about creating pretty components. It's about creating a system that's robust, adaptable, and easy to use.
And speaking of tools, there was a mention of them considering Supernova,
Oh yeah, super.
this automated design system management platform.
Right, it's a really interesting tool.
So what were they interested in with Supernova?
Well, they were particularly drawn to its ability to automate documentation,
Okay.
connect to their existing tools, and manage all their design tokens in one place.
So like a command center for their design system.
Exactly, and they even highlighted some potential benefits,
Like what?
like reducing design and development time, minimizing tech debt,
Sounds amazing.
right, and getting a better grasp on how the system was being used across their products.
So why didn't they go with it?
That's not entirely clear.
Okay.
They did request a trial, but it seems like they ultimately went in a different direction.
Maybe the cost was too high?
Could be.
Or they found a better fit for their workflow?
Maybe. Or maybe they felt confident enough in their own abilities.
That's true. They were a very capable team.
They were, but even though they didn't use Supernova, it's still a great example of the tools that are out there.
Right, showing that there's a whole ecosystem of solutions to help companies with their design systems.
And it shows that Betterfly was open to exploring different options.
Right, finding the best solution for their needs.
Exactly. They weren't afraid to experiment.
And that spirit of experimentation, it's reflected in their whole approach to building Bubble.
Totally. They weren't just following a recipe. They were creating their own unique flavor.
Speaking of creating, they didn't just build this system and expect everyone to know how to use it.
Oh, no, definitely not.
They must have had some sort of plan for training and onboarding people to the wonderful world of Bubble.
Absolutely. They knew that people are at the heart of any successful design system.
Right, you can have the best technology, but if people don't get it.
It's all for nothing.
So how did they approach this human side of building Bubble?
While they emphasized communication and training, they knew that getting everyone on board with atomic design and Bubble would require a big shift in mindset.
It's like a cultural transformation.
Exactly, and they were ready to invest the time and resources to make it happen.
Because people are naturally resistant to change.
Especially when it comes to their work.
Right, so they really put effort into explaining the why.
Benefits, addressing any concerns.
Making people feel like they were part of the solution?
Exactly, and one of the key figures in this seems to have been Nayi Nunez.
Okay, Nayi Nunez.
Yeah, a team member who really pushed this idea of treating everything as a first version.
Not a proof of concept.
Right, she recognized that trying to create the perfect system from the start could be paralyzing.
Yeah, you can get lost in the details.
So she advocated for a more iterative approach, embracing imperfection.
So get something working, gather feedback, refine it over time.
Exactly. And this approach helped alleviate the pressure of getting everything right immediately.
It's a more sustainable way to work.
And it fosters that culture of experimentation and learning.
I like that.
And to support this further, they also plan to create a playbook.
A playbook, interesting. What would be in this playbook?
Well, they envisioned it as this comprehensive guide to everything Bubble.
Right.
Explaining the purpose, the structure, outlining the workflow, providing instructions.
So a one-stop shop for all things Bubble.
Exactly, empowering people to become self-sufficient Bubble users.
And learn.
And they planned a whole campaign to get people excited about Bubble.
Like a marketing campaign.
Exactly, they wanted to create buzz, make it the cool thing to do.
I love that.
So they planned to create engaging content,
Okay.
highlighting the benefits, showcasing successful examples.
Show don't tell.
Right. And they also planned workshops and training sessions.
So a mix of education, inspiration, and a little bit of marketing magic.
Exactly. They were pulling out all the stops to make sure Bubble was not just adopted, but embraced.
It sounds like they were really committed to creating this culture of design system thinking.
They were, and they knew it doesn't happen overnight.
Right, it takes time and effort.
And a clear vision and a lot of patience.
And they also wanted to make sure people were actually using Bubble.
Oh yeah, accountability was key.
So they had mechanisms for tracking adherence to the guidelines.
And for identifying areas for improvement.
So they were keeping a close eye on how Bubble was being used.
Exactly. Constantly monitoring its impact, gathering feedback, iterating.
It's like a data-driven culture around their design system.
Precisely. And this approach extended to their communication strategies too.
So they were tracking how effective their messaging was.
Yeah, things like onboarding communications, push notifications, even open rates.
So they weren't just sending stuff out and hoping for the best.
No, they were crafting their messages, measuring their impact, making sure they were resonating.
It's all about that attention to detail.
Exactly. They were thinking about every aspect of the user experience, from onboarding to communication to support.
It's a holistic design system.
Absolutely. And that's what allowed them to achieve their goals and create a design system that was not just visually appealing, but also highly functional and scalable.
It's amazing how they brought all these different pieces together.
It is the technology, the culture, the data, the communication.
And created a design system that truly reflected their company.
It's a testament to their vision, their dedication, and their willingness to embrace change and continuous improvement.
So they had the vision, the structure, the processes, the people in place.
Right, but did it actually work?
Yeah. Did Bubble deliver on its promises?
That's the question, and in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore exactly that.
Okay, I can't wait.
Yeah.
All right, so we've seen how Betterfly painstakingly planned and built Bubble, their design system. But did it actually work?
Right, the big question. Did it help them achieve those ambitious goals they set? Faster development, more consistency, smoother product launches.
Give me the good news. Did Bubble deliver?
Well, based on what we see here, yeah, Bubble wasn't just some theoretical idea. It actually had a real impact on how Betterfly operates.
Okay, I like where this is going. So where do we see this impact most clearly?
One of the most telling areas is their client portal and the onboarding process for new companies and their employees.
Onboarding, right? That's crucial for any business.
And they set some pretty aggressive targets to measure their success there.
They were talking KPIs, right? Key performance indicators.
Exactly, those measurable goals to track their progress.
So what kind of KPIs were they focused on?
Well, one of the big ones was getting 90% of companies to onboard their employees within the first 3 days after activating their account.
3 days. That's a tight time frame.
It is, but it shows how important a smooth and efficient onboarding experience was to them.
Makes sense. If you can get people up and running quickly, they're more likely to stick around.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
they weren't quite hitting that 90% yet, more like 72% at the time of these materials.
72%, not bad, but still room for improvement.
Right. But they were also tracking the percentage of employees successfully onboarded through the app itself.
Okay, so they were looking at it from both sides, the company and the employee.
Exactly. And they were using those KPIs not just to measure success, but to find areas where they could tweak the onboarding flow and make it even smoother.
So they were using data to make better decisions. That's smart.
Exactly. Data-driven design. That's the hallmark of a good system. And Bubble wasn't just about the client-facing stuff either. It played a big role in streamlining their back-office systems, too.
Back office, that's the behind-the-scenes stuff, right?
Yeah.
Managing clients' benefits, all the operational tasks.
You got it. And Betterfly wanted to make those systems more efficient, more user-friendly. They were tracking things like daily sessions, daily transactions, turnaround time for tasks, all that.
So how often people were using the systems, how much work they were getting done, how long it took to do specific tasks.
Exactly. And they were using Bubble to create a more consistent and intuitive interface for those systems. They even had this migrator of experience tool.
A migrator of experience. Okay, what did that do?
It sounds like they were moving existing clients to a new platform, probably one built with Bubble components and guidelines.
So Bubble wasn't just for new products, they were using it to upgrade their old systems too.
Exactly. They were really committed to using it across the board.
It's pretty impressive how they managed to scale Bubble to handle all those different applications.
It is. It shows how flexible the atomic design approach is.
And it highlights their dedication to consistency. Whether you're a client, an employee, or an internal team member, you're interacting with the same design language.
Exactly. That consistency not only makes things easier to use, it also reinforces their brand.
It's like they're creating this unified experience across all their touch points.
Absolutely. And that focus on user experience went beyond the visual design of their products. They were using Bubble to enhance their communication with users too, both through the app and their support channels.
So Bubble was helping them talk to their users more effectively.
Exactly. They were tracking things like how well their onboarding messages were working, how effective their push notifications were, even their open rates.
So they were paying attention to how users were responding to their messages.
Absolutely. And they were working on automating their communications, creating personalized messages for each user.
So tailoring the message to the individual, that's smart.
It's all about creating a more relevant, more engaging experience, leading to happier, more loyal users.
And they're also trying to improve their help center, right? That's so important for users who have questions.
Absolutely. They wanted to create this really comprehensive and searchable help center with at least 100 articles.
Wow, so they were aiming for a really thorough resource. Were they hitting that target?
Well, at the time of these materials, they had about 50 articles published.
Halfway there.
But they weren't just throwing articles up there randomly. They were using analytics to figure out what users were actually searching for.
Making sure the help center was actually helpful.
Right, answering the questions people were actually asking. And they were also working on integrating their help center with other tools like Intercom.
Intercom, that's a customer messaging platform, right?
Exactly, so they could provide more personalized support, meeting users where they are.
It's all about that seamless experience.
Right, anticipate their needs, provide solutions before they even have to ask.
It's inspiring to see how Betterfly used Bubble not just for consistency, but to improve communication, support, and the overall user experience.
It is a great example of how a well-designed system can impact the whole organization.
But even with all this progress, they were still realistic about the challenges ahead.
Oh, of course, every journey has its bumps in the road.
So what were some of the hurdles they were anticipating?
One of the big ones was adapting to local contexts as they expanded into new countries.
Right, making sure their products were relevant to users in different languages and cultures.
Exactly, and they were also focused on integrating new features, things like flexible compensation, which meant adapting Bubble to handle new workflows and data.
So as their products evolved, Bubble needed to evolve with them.
Right, providing the building blocks for those new features. And they were also working on automating more of their global processes.
So it's an ongoing process.
Absolutely, always refining and adapting.
It sounds like a lot to juggle.
It is, but they had a solid plan, a dedicated team, a willingness to learn and improve.
So Bubble wasn't just about design, it was about their whole approach to building products and growing their business.
It was about creating a better experience for everyone, inside and out.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the initial idea to the implementation of this company-wide design system.
It's been quite a journey.
It has, and I hope our listeners found it as insightful and inspiring as we did. We encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, challenge assumptions, ask questions, and never stop pushing the boundaries of design. Until next time.